Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and as always, it is an honour to be able to rise and represent the good people of Battle River Crowfoot in the House of Commons. And today I do so to enter into debate on what is ironically the fall fiscal update, which a whole host of people that I'm sure are watching, and certainly many, will ask the question, why are we debating come springtime a bill that was tabled in the fall? Well, I have that same question, and it comes down simply to this, Madam Speaker. While the Liberals tabled their budget a couple of weeks ago, which I will talk about here in a moment, the fact that while it is spring, we are still debating the fall economic statement, it is a clear example of the utter incompetence that we see in this Liberal Party. They can not only manage their legislative agenda, they certainly cannot manage an economy. We are seeing debt spiraling out of control. We are seeing pain and suffering in the lives of so many Canadians, Madam Speaker. So that is a perfect example, and the reason why I wanted to start my speech emphasizing that, because when folks watch this, they'll look on the screen and they will see that it says Fall Economic Statement Implementation Act 2023. Yet here we are debating the budget after and earlier today also debating the Budget Implementation Act 2024. Madam Speaker, highlighting the true incompetence and inability for that Prime Minister, those Liberals, and their coalition partners that prop them up come storm or sunny day. Their coalition partners are always there to stand with the Liberals, propping up their corruption, their incompetence, and ultimately the pain that Canadians are feeling from coast to coast. Madam Speaker, when it comes to the true root of what I hear as I travel across my constituency, related to both the fall economic statement, but also to the budget that was tabled here a couple of weeks ago. There is crime and chaos in our streets and gravel roads. You know, it's interesting, Madam Speaker. Like I'm sure many MPs, certainly I hope the Liberals and the NDP do this, but I have what I affectionately refer to as my call list. Now, sometimes it can take some time to get through that call list because there's a whole host of people, the 110,000 or so people that I represent, that want to speak to me. And I find it incredibly important to actually speak with individuals that are
of order. The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill. Sorry, it's just.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yes.
I'm just questioning the relevance of this speech to the motion that was put forward, which is to delete the short title of the act. And I have a hard time trying to connect this to delete.
Obviously, the honourable member recognizes that there is some leeway during speeches. However, I do want to remind members to make sure that they are actually speaking to the bill that is before the House. So their speech should actually be in reference to that. Is there another point of order? The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby, or he's just standing, leaving? Okay, so no, the honourable member Battle River for Crowfoot.
Madam Speaker, you know, I find it so interesting. You know, I was just talking about, as I was speaking to my constituents, and that member from Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, that she would suggest that somehow the pain that Canadians are experiencing is not relevant to the discussion in this place. It is that ignorance, it is that truly being so utterly out of touch that it's almost difficult to find words. And why, Madam Speaker, I would suggest that she take notes when it comes to what I'm describing. And that's the actual need to speak to our constituents. The very basis of why this place exists is because we are to be representatives of the people, not elites that are imposing their vision upon a populace that don't have a say. No, Madam Speaker. Those are days gone by, and while that may be the pursuit of that member and so many members of the Liberal Party, that is an absolutely unacceptable attitude to have for a member of the House of Commons, a place where the common people should have a voice. And Madam Speaker, I would suggest...
Order. I want to remind the honourable member, his comments are actually almost speaking about the individual itself, and I just want to remind members that they should be talking. They can debate about the government policies, about the party itself, but they shouldn't be attacking individual members. So I want to caution the honourable member on some of the comments that he has made, because it's actually attacking the individual member. I'm assuming that that's what the honourable member was also getting up on the point of order at the same time that I was. So I would just caution the members to make sure that they speak to the bill, and it is pretty wide. I've just did another check on that, but I also want to remind the member that that the attack shouldn't be on individuals themselves. It should be on either the policies or the government's actions. So there you go. The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Oh, sorry, I still have a point of order. The honourable member for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
I would actually like to suggest that he did attack me. He was just not veering in that direction and made comments about my person and assumptions about what my motivation was. So I actually asked the Speaker to ask him to retract those statements about me.
Ask the honourable member to retract his statements.
On that point, Madam.
Sorry, I now have another point of order. The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. On that same point, Madam Chair, I mean, my colleague is just simply pointing out the government's general disdain for the general public, right? This is not
on this here, and I want to ask the honourable. I'm going to indicate to the honourable member. I heard the comments. There was 2 of them actually, and so I just asked the honourable member to please withdraw those comments so that he can continue on with his speech. On the point of order, the honourable member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
I would request some clarity. I heard the comments as well. I was listening very closely, and he certainly did. He did call into the knowledge of the individual, and he used the word ignorance, which is not unparliamentary. I think you'll find the Hansard is littered with the word, and I did not hear a word that was unparliamentary. I would ask.
Yes, no, and so I did catch it the first time. However, I thought that the honourable member was changing, but there was a second time as well, and so I just want to remind the honourable member. I'm asking the honourable member just to withdraw his comment so he can go on with his speech.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I withdraw the comments that have caused so much offence in this place.
River Crowfoot can continue with this speech.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think that the last number of minutes is just a demonstration of the chaos and the inability for that Liberal government to accomplish anything. So, Madam Speaker, what I would suggest is that for every member of the Liberal Party, for every member of the New Democratic Party, to do what our job is, and that is to speak to Canadians. Because, Madam Speaker, when you speak to Canadians, you hear a story of pain. You hear a story of uncertainty. You hear stories where vehicles are being stolen from driveways, whether that be urban driveways in downtown Toronto, or whether that be gravel roads in rural Canada. Madam Speaker, the crime, the chaos, the corruption is becoming too much for so many Canadians to handle. And what's interesting, Madam Speaker, as those Liberals try to interrupt and cast aspersions upon the so important debates that we need to have in this place, is that they forget the fact that we serve and we need to serve the people. They forget that. And what is so unfortunate is that the consequence of their forgetting that simple fact, we may disagree on policies, and I've said this before, Madam Speaker, and I will say it again, there was a time when you could look at the government in power and understand that you may not agree with all of their policies, but you still had respect for the institutions and the offices to which those individuals held. Well, Madam Speaker, increasingly I'm hearing from constituents that have lost respect for the institutions They do not trust not only the Prime Minister, but the office to which he holds and the direction to which this government is leading the country. Because Canadians are suffering, Canadians are hurting, and I hear it constantly, and I mentioned my call list. And as I was preparing for this speech, Madam Speaker, I was scrolling through that call list, and you'll understand my passion when I've heard from so many Canadians that are hurting so desperately, in need of relief, in need of hope, in need of somebody that can provide leadership in this country. But instead, they have a government that intends to divide, a government that intends to distract, a government that instead of being responsible is the definition of irresponsible. So, Madam Speaker, the passion that myself and I know so many of my Conservative colleagues are expressing is that of amplifying the voices of Canadians who have been forgotten by those Liberals and those New Democrats that have abandoned the very basis of what it should be to be a member of Parliament. So, Madam Speaker, when we look at the budget, and similar in frame to that of which we see the fall economic statement, we see that the Liberals show that there is not a responsible path back to spending within its means. And we see the consequences of that. It's not just adding a few extra bonds that the Bank of Canada has to figure out. And those are complicated financial mechanisms that so many don't understand the specifics of. But when it comes down to it, the consequence is this. It raises costs. It's the same thing with the high tax agenda to which those members perpetuate. It is raising costs for Canadians. We hear so much about how the Liberals support quadrupling the carbon tax, increasing taxes at every turn. Yet the consequence of that, Madam Speaker, is that Canadians are paying more. Canadians are paying more, and they are hurting as a result. Madam Speaker, we see that there has been a complete and utter abandonment of common sense within this place. And the result is that the country is moving in a direction that certainly Canadians did not vote for. You know, it's interesting, Madam Speaker, as I, like so many MPs, travel across the country, whether that's in airports in my commute across the country, or whether that be the messages that we get when folks are watching the proceedings in this place. And increasingly, Madam Speaker, we hear how they including some individuals that have shared that while they voted Liberal or New Democrat in the past, they won't do it again because they see how what they were told is not what is being offered. And the clear proof of that is exactly what we have before us in both the fall economic statement and the budget that was debated earlier today. And in fact, Madam Speaker, we see how there's been this very interesting trend as of late, where the NDP are criticizing their coalition confidence and supply partners over there, yet they've said that they will continue to prop up the crime, corruption and chaos and out-of-control spending. We see how the Prime Minister seems to be quick to point out some of the challenges the country is facing. You know, what's interesting, Madam Speaker, is that he fails to acknowledge that for nearly 9 years, he has been the captain of a ship. And Madam Speaker, what is interesting, to use and further that ship analogy for just a moment longer, is the fact that when a captain starts steering a ship, what may be a small course correction in the beginning can result in massive pain and directionless as the ship continues to sail on. When you do not take responsibility for the maintenance of that ship, it begins to fall apart. And while the captain standing at the wheel can blame everybody but himself, the buck stops at the top. The buck stops with the one who's in charge. And what is so interesting is the Prime Minister has, as of late, had these revelations that Canadians are hurting. And I agree with him on that. But here's the reality. It is the policies of that NDP Liberal coalition that have caused so much hurt. So then so often, Madam Speaker, we hear from the other side, and many Canadians say, well, what would the Conservatives do differently? Well, Madam Speaker, we have a record that we can be proud of. shepherding the country through incredible financial difficulties while understanding fiscal responsibility. We have so much potential that exists in terms of the ability and the hope of the future of this country. So, Madam Speaker, I look forward to being able to respond to some questions here, because when it comes to the future of our country, the future is bright, but it seems that the solution needs to include getting rid of it.
Yeah. So I just want to bring it back to the original question, and the motion is that the bill see fit to be amended by deleting the short title. I'm not sure that the honourable member actually got to the actual motion as to why the title should be deleted or why not, but I want to remind members to be speaking on the motion as well. And so questions and comments, questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I guess the member could be excused in the sense that he's the one that brought in the motion. And at the end of the day, it's truly amazing how the Conservative Party really knows no shame. Think about it, Madam Speaker. The member himself that moves the motion is criticizing the government because we're not getting this legislation passed because it's a false economic statement. Well, duh. Who do you think's preventing it from passing? The Conservative Party of Canada, Madam Speaker. How are they doing it? By bringing in silly motions that the member just introduced, even though he didn't even talk about it, Madam Speaker. Can the member explain to Canadians how it is they can justify filibustering legislation and then blaming the government because we're not stopping them from filibustering fast enough?
River Crowfoot.
Madam Speaker, I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to respond to that question from the member whose word count certainly is the only thing that he can point to as being successful in terms of his service in Parliament. But let me simply suggest this. Madam Speaker, when it comes to the very root of what we're talking about, it is the government that controls the legislative agenda. They are quick to blame everybody else for their failures when it's that member himself have, on a number of occasions, moved amendments similar to this with the defense that there was important things that needed to be discussed. So when they do it, it's legitimate. When we do it, in order to make sure the voices of Canadians are heard, it's somehow filibustering. Well, Madam Speaker, let me be crystal clear. Never in this place is it wrong to bring up the pain and the suffering that Canadians are facing because, Madam Speaker, we have to offer hope at a time when people feel hopeless, and certainly the solution is a change in government because they're tired, corrupt, and certainly out of ideas. And this full economic statement and the budget that we debated earlier today are clear proof of that.
Yeah. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Don Valley, Kingsway. For Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you. Well, my honourable colleague brought up the Conservative record. He said it's something that could be pointed to so Canadians could get an idea of what they could expect from a future Conservative government. So I had the benefit of actually being in this House from 2008, 2015, and my honourable colleague said that the Conservative government stewarded this country through tough economic times. Well, what he didn't tell people is that the Harper government ran 7 consecutive deficits in a row, only claiming to balance the budget in the 8th year, which happened to be an election year, and that turned out to be a deficit budget as well. So they didn't balance the budget in a single year of the 8 years of the House. So I'm wondering, is it the case that Canadians can expect similar behavior from a future government of consecutive deficits, although they promise to be fiscally prudent?
For Battle River Crowfoot.
Yeah. You know, how ironic is it, Madam Speaker, that you have a member of the NDP that will, seemingly there is no promise that they can break that would force them to renege on the pension and supply agreement that they seem so bent on keeping with those corrupt Liberals. Madam Speaker, I'm proud of the Conservative record. I'm proud to stand and represent my constituents in this place. And he asked about what Conservatives would do. Well, Madam Speaker, I'll be crystal clear on that as well. Conservatives will axe the tax, yes, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime, because that's what Canadians are asking, and it's time that everybody in this place pay attention.
Yeah. Questions et commentaires?
Questions and comments?
Cypress Hills Grass. No, excuse, l'honneur.
Apologies. The honourable member for Rimouski-Neigette-Témiscouat-Télémasque.
There too, but it's not.
Madam Speaker, there's been some joking. Point of order, the honourable member for Drummond. Madam Speaker, I think that we heard some non-parliamentary language, and I think my colleague has every reason to feel offended. Thank you. My apologies. No, I'm sorry if I was misunderstood. I was looking to see if it was you who had stood up, and I didn't look in the right direction, and so it's just the way it came out. I apologize. The honourable member for Rimouski Les Basques has the floor. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to go down in history, but maybe not for the right reasons. Madam Speaker, it's a miracle. The Conservative Party is now the Conservative Party, the party that looks after families and the middle class. This is very sudden. I'd like to ask my colleague, in the bill we're discussing right now, it's the fall economic update. Madam Speaker, according to the last budget, there's a tax credit for the energy sector that to the tune of some $20 billion. The Conservative Party hasn't said anything about that. But I'd like to ask my colleague if he's proud that his party is supporting a $20 million tax credit that whereas that money could go to the middle class and be much more helpful. That's my question, Madam Speaker, to my colleague, because he's simply avoiding talking about it. The money is there, but instead it's going to the oil patch, which really doesn't need it.
You know, Madam Speaker, I am proud to represent the heart of the Canadian energy sector. In fact, specifically, we think about 2.5% of Canada's economy, of which contributes to the equalization that benefits that member's province specifically. But, Madam Speaker, let me suggest this. A prosperous Canada benefits everybody. For a member of a party that claims to stand up for jurisdictional rights and responsibilities within this country, I would suggest that they adopt an attitude that encourages prosperity and economic advancement, as opposed to trying to bankrupt part of the country that would have not only a devastating effect on the people that I represent, but the entire country. So, Madam Speaker, instead of punishing people, let's build a country that actually builds a prosperous future for all Canadians. That's how we make a rich middle class in this country. It's regrettable that we have a coalition amongst three left-leaning parties that